it's a waterfront. You can chill, and just like chop it up or whatever. But what was cool is I actually caught a dolphin coming in and out of the stream, like coming up, like in and out of, what I'm saying, in and out of the river. And I'm like, yo, I ain't never seen a dolphin that close to, proximity of where there's a lot of activity with people, driving the boats up and down the river, etc. And I also know dolphins have an extremely powerful, like, spiritual connection to us as a people. And then I also saw on one of the videos where you were talking about, like, those people who will go deep sea fishing who are like catching mermaids and like eating them, you know what I'm saying? And it's just like, can you kind of tie into the significance of how dolphins are really a part of, spirituality and the connection to, like, maybe whatever you want to go with it, but also why they were out there fishing for mermaids and mermen to eat them to kind of absorb their consciousness or whatever it was that they were doing that for?
Because these things that come from the sea are actually extraterrestrial origin. When you're talking about the Dogon tribe in Mali, see, the Dogon tribe in Mali, they had the constellations mapped out right before NASA was even created. So the Dogons, you know what I'm saying, they said that they, ascended from dolphins and things of that nature. So that's when you're talking about, the activation of a certain cerebral cortex that they have. They can use almost like, I'm not sure what percentage of the brain they can use, but I think it's something like 20%, I believe. I'm not sure, but they're very smart. So that's why they don't want, want them around, pregnant women and things of that nature, because they can do a form of horizontal gene transfer, which is where you transmute a certain vibration of consciousness and you put it inside of a different vessel. So that same thing can, take place when you're talking about the activation of certain genetics. Now, when you're talking about mermaids, now that's because they contain the elixir of immortality, their genetic format, right? So if you eat, a mermaid or whatever, they create cell growth proliferation. It gives you immortalized cell lines. Right. So that's when the cells is able to replicate themselves on an infinite level, because when you understand the genetic format of a mermaid, it is really amalgamated by the stardust of the planet. Right. So it's basically carbon. It's a part of the building block of all civilization. So they can do any type of metamorphosis as far as, like, for instance, if you look at a starfish, you take a starfish and you cut it in half, or you just chop it and kill it, another one will grow right back. The same thing can take place with a mermaid. The same thing can take place with a so-called black person's genetics if it's working in harmony with the energy of the sun and nature. Like, literally do that. They even talked about that in that the story that the lady had put about. They said that the mermaid, her arm got cut off or her hand got cut off, and it grew right back.
Yeah.
Immortalized cell lines. That's why they needed Henrietta Lacks's, her genetics and her cells in order to coat spaceships and all this other stuff, right? That's neuromelanin, that's carbon, right? So the great majority, that denotes the fact that the great majority of the mermaids are actually melanated or carbonated, right? So, but the owner who owns that sea company, he went to high school in my city. He owned it's called the Star Kiss tuna factory or something like that. It's one of those. I'm talking about, to make all the salmon. And
that's one of the biggest damn like tuna. I think I want to say they got to be one of the biggest ones in America, if not the world, for that matter.
You know what's crazy about this though? Every Democratic president, because I live, like, where I live at is like the third or second biggest city in Indiana. It's not that big, but I always wonder why every Democratic president came to visit my city. Like, I thought that was weird. You know what I'm saying? He had meetings with the richest family in Evansville called the Chancellors, and he owns the great majority of the coal companies, and the great majority of the coal companies, they own that space. They build spaceships. It's like 45 minutes away from where I live at. They build space ships or whatever. I got pictures. I went to the property. I ain't posting them online. I ain't never talked about this online ever. So you getting free information right here just off the top. So, but they definitely. Where I live at is a significant place. There's a lot of abandoned buildings here, a lot of catacombs, a lot of underground tunnels. There's a multitude of things that lets me know that this city here is an import and export for trafficking and things of that nature.
Oh yeah. Nah, and I'm glad you said that, because that brings me to another. Bless you. That brings me to another direction that I want to get into too, because in certain guests that I know I can cover a lot of ground, cover a lot of space with in regards to going into some of these different topics. So I know I've shared on this show a few times, and I guess have as well, but there's a lot of different portals, a lot of different stargates. There's a lot of significant pyramidal structures, in the Americas that a lot of people aren't really privy to or just don't know of. So, for example, can you kind of share what the significance is for some of these different very powerful or very historical or ancient monuments, such as the Cahokia Mounds, or such as the St. Louis Arch, or such as, the pyramid in Washington, like all these different like structures and different places, and how they have a really significant purpose for, higher intelligence and like extraterrestrial activity.
Just like, I'm glad you say that, especially, St. Louis, where the Cahokia Mounds and all that, that's where the New Madrid fault line is at. That's where the black sun was at. That put that solar eclipse that took place in 2024, the last one we had, the solar eclipse of judgment. That was right there at the apex of the New Madrid fault line, where you have Carbondale, Illinois, what they call Little Egypt, which is about 30 minutes away from St. Louis. Now, St. Louis is in alignment with the Big Dipper star constellation, along with other planetary alignments such as Detroit, Philadelphia, New York, Washington, D.C., Boston. But when you're talking about all these monolithic structures, they're pulling down certain kinetic energy. These are basically energy. They pull in like energy from the magnetosphere. But you have dark pockets of energy, such as like places like Stone Mountain, Georgia. That's on the 33rd parallel, right? Atlanta. Everything that was on the 33rd parallel was a powerful energy there. Then you had the same one in Dallas. Dallas is on the 33rd parallel, and that's where, JFK got unalived, right? The same thing, like, then when you go all the way to Baghdad and over in Iraq, that's in alignment with the 33rd parallel, where they had all those portals. When they was talking about the activation of weapons of mass destruction, they wasn't over there for that. They was looking for portals. You see what I'm saying? So even when you look at national parks, so national parks is also in alignment with dark ley line energy grid systems as well. So there's a lot of portals inside national parks, which is why you see a lot of people come up missing. And this is where you see a lot of Yeti or Bigfoot.
Bigfoot, yep, Sasquatches, yeah.
It's Sasquatch is real because Bigfoot is actually real because during that time period, he was working with the indigenous people. Because they're not, anytime you see a Bigfoot walking like hunched over like that, that's a fake one. That's somebody wearing a costume. Anytime you see a Bigfoot walking upright, that's a real one because they're not savage and they're not low vibrational. They're high vibrational individuals. Right?
Very intelligent. Extremely intelligent.
So that's what you must know. So that's how you can tell the difference between the real one and the fake one.
Yeah, and they call them shaggies. And what's crazy? They are extremely powerful because they have the ability to cloak themselves or create a cloak in the wooded areas that they're in. They have the ability, like how in Black Panther, where they flew into the mountain, like when they came from like the common area. Like they really do that for real. That's not a game. That's real. You know what I mean? And they have the ability to do that. So, and they also have access to the inner earth, correct? Like they have the ability to go into like caverns, and get into the inner earth because they vibrate on that frequency of, intelligent life form and beings who have a pass into, the inner earth in those realms.
And before anybody say that's not real, whatever, just understand they do understand that our governments, they have the technology to create whatever they want to create. So if you don't think extraterrestrials are real or whatever, they can create them. You know what I'm saying? We have them inside Hollow Earth and they escape. They call it Nightmare Hall. You got to read the book, The Man from Planet Risk by Dr. Malachi York. He talks about Nightmare Hall. And that's to those deep underground military bunker systems. And when they come out, just like in the movie Cabin in the Woods, where was they at? They was at a national park. And that's when the simulation began. Because like I said, it's on a dark ley line. Watch the movie Cabin in the Woods.
What is it? Cabin in the Woods?
Cabin in the Woods.
Cabin in the Woods? Okay.
Yep.
I'm going to check that out. Cabin in the Woods.
It shows puppeteers underneath the earth, and then they looking for a sacrifice. It's kind of like the same thing that's taking place right now, which is why you're seeing so many rituals that's taking place on the surface, from the celebrity gossip to the Pope to everything that's happening in the politics to technology and the rise of artificial intelligence. Everything that's taking place on the surface, but they got all these entities and these people down below, and they bring them up to the surface to feed on humanity in a form of a sacrifice to keep the three-dimensional world going. Yeah, you got to watch that. It's very deep, bro.
Yeah.
Great
yeah.
It's a great movie.
Yeah. No, I know. I got another good question because I got several that I want to bring up, but I'm gonna bring this one up. Laverne, shout out to Laverne Turner. She says, "Can you please give me a clear understanding why Trump is putting, or he's trying to, wants to try to put a golden dome cover over the USA? He said it's for nuclear protection, but she doesn't believe that's the only reason. I know you had did a video on this, but can you kind of tap into what that's about in regards to that golden dome that he's talking about and that Sister Laverne is talking about?"
He's really trying to block the transmission of the sun. That's all it is. He's really blocking the transmission of the sun. But like I said, they create everything under a Hegelian dialectic principle. Problem, reaction, solution. Who's the problem? Russia, Iran, China. The reaction, let's put a golden dome on the planet. Then the solution is a diabolical solution because once they put a dome over you, that's when they're going to implement that one world order, artificial intelligence-based society. So the reason they doing that is, like I said, they trying to block out the transmission because they know that those solar flares that harmonize with our genetic meat suit is going to put us at a certain vibration to eradicate this whole existence that they created.
Yeah, that's that. Yeah, we're going. Okay, now with that, how does, if it does, how does any of this maybe tie into the traverse and the travel path of Nibiru, and then also like the return of the 24 elders? Like, I've been hearing a lot of people talking about Nibiru. Some people I feel like are spot on. Some people I feel like I don't know what the hell they're talking about. But with that, does Nibiru and where we're at with this particular junction of the transition of the 6,000 year cycle from the Piscean to the Aquarian, and from what I've gathered in research, the path, I believe, of Nibiru to come around this part of the solar system is like every 3,600 years, if I'm not mistaken. So now, does that path, or that travel path or flight path of Nibiru and the ancients and the ancestors and all that, does that play into any sort of role in how this thing with these cycles are going to meet? Are they going to kind of cross paths? Like, how is all this kind of aligned to what your research and your studies have kind of enlightened you to?
Well, I'm going to give an esoteric and an exoteric answer.
Okay.
So the esoteric, I'm going to start with the hidden message. The return of Nibiru means Nabara. Nabara means Bara, which is the Bathari gland. The Bathari gland is activated by the hippocampus layer of the brain that takes you to a different space and time, a shift in consciousness. So now, from an esoteric standpoint, when you're talking about the return of Nibiru, when you're talking about the Pentagon and all this stuff, talking about the Anunnaki is coming, like I said, everything that they're telling you that's on national television and the media or whatever is actually talking about the enhancing of your genetics. That's all it's basically talking about, right? The return of Jesus, and the return of Jesus is the return of Christ, the return of Christ consciousness. Everything is really just talking about DNA activation.
Yeah, that makes sense, and that'll make a lot of sense.
I mean, that's the best way, but everything, like, as far as like religion, everything is sensationalized by mythology or whatever. Everything that they're telling you in these religious systems is basically talking about certain genetics. But like I said, you do have a galactic federation. You have a pantheon of gods. That is controlling everything outside the firmament. So.
I got you.
Now,
go ahead. No, go ahead. What was the last thing you said?
No, I'm saying you do have a pantheon of gods. Like when you get into Gnosticism, you do have archons who control the three-dimensional and the fourth-dimensional world, the demiurge. And then you also have creator gods, the Elohim, the Anunnaki, who are above those individuals as well.
And there was someone who asked the question earlier. I know it's going to be too challenging to find it now in regards to where the comments are, but the question was, can you ask BDELL to kind of describe and break down the differences between the Anunnaki? Because as far as my research has brought me, I do know that there is a positive and a negative version of these Anunnaki. Now, Brother Big Chief said that those are kind of like aspects, of, entities versus a actual source or, of a deity or entity. So is your line of thinking in the same, kind of like area of what Big Chief was talking about? Do you have your own perception of how you feel like you can kind of break down the difference between the positive or negative aspects of Anunnaki?
Yeah, I have my own, I have my own logical assertion on it. So when you look at it from a biblical or a mythological composition, when you're talking about the Anunnaki, so you have the ones who fell. That the ones who fell are the seeds of Enlil, right? Mm. That is 1/3 of the galaxy that went against the order of Anu. So that is also in alignment with the 200 fallen angels in the book of Enoch, the ones who fell in Mount Hermon. So those are the same ones as far as like the cherubim of the Bible, right? So the cherubim, the archons, the draconian reptilians or whatever, those are all the same factions, but you just looking at different, tiers of, monotheism and different, mythologies that lines up to the same story. So those were the ones that fell in Mount Hermon. And, and I did a whole video talking about how they use artificial intelligence as a catalyst to where these archons is able to control the technology through humans. I broke that down too as well.
Yeah, I think I saw that.
That's all the ones. That's all you're really talking about. 1/3 of the galaxy that went against the order of Anu, and then they fell in grace. And then you had, that's what created the separatism. They fell in frequency. They fell into the demiurge. They fell into materialism, right? So then from that, that's when you had the creation of the black nobility, right? Because this is why I tell people all the time. This is how you know that when you understand genealogy and microbiology, you get the recessive from the dominant. You don't get the dominant from the recessive. So that means that the first Canaanites were actually black. And those black Canaanites is connected to the black nobility that is connected to the seeds of the cherubim, who is known as the draconian, archonic reptilian, shape-shifting black entities who control Europeans on the surface.
Yeah, boy. Okay. And that definitely plays a role into, what's going on, like I said, from the astrological aspects. Because even like where I'm at on the planet, like I'm a nerd when it comes to stars and studying stars and the constellation and all that. So I got telescopes and I got the apps and all that. So shout out to brother Nkosi. He turned me on to a new one.
I got a crazy stuff. I mean, I should go get it, but my son in there, he probably in there playing with. I got a big old telescope.
Listen, I make it up there to the mountain. I'm bringing mine because I know it's going to be some sights to see. I can tell you that for sure. Yeah, man. So I'm looking at this app now. The newest one I got is called Stellarium, and it's dope, man, because you can actually, it's dope. You can go to different star systems and travel through the satellites and view things. And I remember when I pulled up the first day I got it, I pulled up Earth, and I was looking at it, and it looked like they had the shape of inner Earth on the planet, but it was kind of like they blocked it out, because I was scrolling around. You know what I mean? Huh?
Where was it showing at?
It was showing I had to, I had to find it, but I'll text you a picture of it. I'm gonna text you a picture of it. But what it was is, I'm looking at it, I'm like, yo, ain't no continent on the surface of the planet in a shape like that goddamn that shape. So I know that shape, right? So I'm just like, it's crazy to me how you can see it, but it's still they're trying to mask it in a way. But I know what that is. I'm like, yo, that's the inner Earth. That's what that is right there, and you can see it from the satellites on that app called Stellarium. And so, and I'll text it to you too. I'll text you that picture because I have to dig way down to find it. But it was dope. And so I say all that to say the ancient civilizations of Lemuria and Atlantis, right? I was just watching, I think it's called Unsolved Mysteries or something like that with William Shatner. I think it's season 6, and I don't remember what episode, but I was watching one of them and they were talking about what they thought was the entrance or some remnants of Atlantis. But there's a lot of different theories about, Atlantis and Lemuria. So from your research, from your studies and, the knowledge that you've been blessed to possess, what would you say in regards to the civilization of Atlantis? Did you feel like it really actually disappeared and it no longer exists? Or do you feel like something happened to where they just are no longer visible on the surface, but it definitely still does exist? What is your take on Atlantis and Lemuria?
Now, when you talk about Atlantis, that was during that time, they had a 5th dimensional civilization. So everything, operated by way of, high density consciousness. It was everything was internal to where they was able to receive abundantly on the material world, on a material level. But as far as you had these individuals, it's kind of, you ever seen the movie Greenland? This is the best way I can explain it.
You say Greenland?
Yeah, Greenland.
I don't think I've seen that one.
The same thing that's happening to our planet during that time period is what happened to the Atlanteans. So they have to preserve a certain race. They have to preserve a certain blood type. This is why they're going around looking for the old blood type right now. They got planes and going to different cities and stuff. They're looking for the old blood type because they understand that's extraterrestrial DNA. That's extraterrestrial DNA. They understand that. And the reason they do that, this is why so many people coming up in Canada missing right now and all this other stuff. But that's a whole different story. You know what I'm saying? But as far as, what took place in Greenland in the movie, it was going through a calamity. But the preserving of a certain people, they went to Greenland inside this little, it's like a doomsday type of bunker. It's like a cave system they went inside. So same thing as actually took place when we talking about the fall of Lemuria, Mayan civilizations or whatever. Some of these people didn't disappear. You know what I'm saying? Some of them just went to the caverns of the earth and hid out. They even talk about that when the Anunnaki people, right? When you talk about the Hopi tribes, some of the Hopis, they inside, inner earth civilizations, right? So because they already mastered the surface. It's kind of like the same thing when you're talking about the adept chambers. You go from neophyte, adept to master. Once you master, that's when you get access to, the gateways of planet Earth. You got to master this realm first.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that you said that too, because, even going back to Mount Shasta, there's a lot of people, who go to visit Mount Shasta that have very supernatural or, esoteric or astral, there's a lot of different elevated frequency type of experiences that people have when they go to Mount Shasta. Some people do, some people don't. So, and I know for a fact that's based upon what your vibrational frequency is and the capacity that you have to elevate, to kind of synchronize with a frequency that's probably surrounding a place like Mount Shasta. So when it comes to that, this is something that I've been having conversations with on air and off air in regards to people. But, even those who weren't privy to what you shared about the Black nobility, I still do feel like there's a lot of us who are focusing more on the skin color of, people versus the level of, I would say, maybe energy or frequency or integrity of a person. How much does that matter in regards to where we are now? Are there some people who are of European descent that have the ability to elevate and ascend into, the higher realms of consciousness? Or is there like a cap, kind of like when you drive a U-Haul as a governor that only lets you go so fast, so far? Is that like kind of like what we're seeing with people who don't have access to neuromelanin? Or what's your take on when it comes to that?
Yeah, because the European, or I guess you could say the Canaanite, I wouldn't say all Europeans or whatever, but the great majority who comes from the Canaanite faction, they have eukaryotic cells. And eukaryotic cells is spliced DNA, and it's cultivated by sulfur. And sulfur, it blocks the spinal column to where the regeneration spinal fire doesn't rise up and hit the pineal gland, right? So they don't have the genetics to harmonize with nature. So they don't have internal monologue. Internal monologue is that little voice you hear in your head. Like I can say words in my head, just talk like that. They have to say it. They don't have internal monologue. That internal monologue is your inner child. That inner child is a soul. So they have a spirit. They don't have a soul. And you can tell by the hair follicle. Animals have spirits. People who have that non-ether genetical frequency, the coily hair, what they call the lamb, they just put out a chronomass ejection, the sunspot, that coronal hole, it looked like the sign of the lamb, right? It's like it's talking about the activation of nature. So they, like I said, you have to have a certain genetic format to activate those genetics.
Yeah. But
that doesn't necessarily mean that you come from the cursed bloodline. You got some Europeans that come from the Pleiadian faction, right? Yeah, you talk about when you go into Norse mythology, the Nordics or whatever, some of them individuals were high vibrational. They're not connected to that same seed. But there's a lot, as far as like the cultivation of racism, imperialism, colonization, the system that they built that's based on economic disenfranchisement, all these things that's, that afflicted the planet, that's most likely coming from the faction of that Canaanite. But like I said, the first Canaanite was black. Like I said, you had to have the, genetics, and it's kind of like the same, the Yakub story. Right.
Somebody in the comments mentioned that. They brought that up too.
Remember, what did he say to his brother Yushak? It's basically the same as the Inky and Enlil story. He said, "I will create a people that's going to rule over you for 6,000 years. That 6,000 years is over." The This is why you're seeing everything changing.
Yeah.
Because the bloodline he created, that European he created, them blackamoors he created that gave the edification to the European, their time is running out. It's over.
Oh, yeah.
So then the best way to understand the difference between a black nobility, blackamoor, the ones that, that chose the side of, hedonistic culture and the corporation, those are the ones that's in your religion, your pastor, your preachers, the ones that's in Freemasonry, in Luciferianism, the ones that's, gatekeepers of the movie industry, music industry. That's how you can tell the energy. Those that's connected to the planet, we're trying to get away from the corporation. The ones who want to, keep the corporation going, that's how you know who's a part of the seeds of Enlil in terms of energy and mindset.
Yes, sir. And I've seen like videos of, I'm assuming that it's a version of Enki and of Enlil, and I'm very confident the videos that I've seen. But one of them looks like a brother who's like of Middle Eastern descent, and he has on like a white head wrap, and he has the beard, and he kind of looks like Middle Eastern. And then there's another one who I've been seeing, and he's a brother like about my complexion. He got a beard too, and then he wears like a white cap. I think he has like gold on the white suit that I see him in. Are those any like type of connections or correlations to Enki and Enlil in a modern day, I guess modern day time, or is that like something else that I'm seeing when I see like these people who are servicing on the internet?
The guy that you seeing that they talking about in real time is a black guy named King Yahweh.
Okay.
So, but that's not the real Yahweh, because Yahweh, when you get into the Tetragrammaton, it means agreeable and disagreeable. So he is Enlil. So Yahweh, Enlil, Yaldabaoth, that's the same person. So he's not an artist. So he's just a regular individual. I would say regular because I think he's like a prince or something or whatever. But as far as like him controlling certain factions, as far as like governments and controlling Europeans or whatever, I don't think that's, I think people are getting too caught up into the mythology with that. But as far as like the Maitreya, I think that was a real instance that took place. They talking about the Maitreya who came to, I think he came to the Congo. And he said that he stood about 7 feet tall, and he had like healing and supernatural powers. And then they said when he was walking away, he just vanished in thin air. And they said he was back. Yeah, so that can be because the Maitreya, I think it was in certain forms of ancient Proto-Semitic language, Maitreya translates to Enlil. So that could
now
go ahead.
My bad. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
But yeah, so that can be because Maitreya, like Enlil, that's pretty much when you break down the linguistics of the word and you get into the etymon and all that, his name translates to Enlil. Yeah.
Now, is this the one that looks Middle Eastern, or is that the one that's more melanated?
He the one that looks Middle Eastern with the beard.
Right. Now with Enlil, so Enlil is like but he's the representation of the disagreeable Anunnaki. Is that correct?
Yep. Yes, sir.
Right. So what would be the purpose of him making an appearance and like coming back? Like, what would you think would be the reason for that? Because I saw that footage.
I don't know. Some say that the great it's certain tribes in Africa that's a part of that bloodline. That's why you see the great majority of those cardinals. I don't know where most of them come from in the Vatican and the first black nobility Vatican popes of Rome. The great majority of them were African. They never. It's like I said, none of them was never American. Right. You got your first so-called American pope who's actually black. I mean, when you look at his maternal family, but like I said, just because I can't identify as a rabbit, and I ain't no damn rabbit, you know what I'm saying? But we already know what time it is. They just trying to scramble up the mythology because they don't want people to know that black nobility is running the church, the Vatican. Because it started with a melanated pope, it has to end with a melanated pope.
Yeah, wow.
He's a black passing as white type of European, I guess.
Oh yeah. It's so funny though because that's something that definitely has been talked about thoroughly on this channel, definitely on yours as well in regards to that happening. But it's funny, I thought it was cute the way they kind of slipped him in there versus just putting a straight up brother in there. But I guess
tricknology. That's all it was.
But
And even when you look at that, I even proved that there's another Pope Leo the 14th. That's what they do to throw you off. They make two of everything. Just like you have it's a part of your tribe. Salute to everybody. Salute.
I appreciate it, man. And salute to you and salute to your tribe, because they've been coming over here, you know what I'm saying, clicking up, linking up, showing love and support. The comments, you know what I'm saying? Like, everybody been showing nothing but love. There's been a few stragglers coming with the BS, but I've been handling that accordingly. We don't give that too much energy or light, but we definitely appreciate all the ones coming with the light, coming with, you know, the positive feedback, coming with just the love and support, man. And, you know, for some I've seen was a common one was like, yo, brother BDELL is a breath of fresh air. So I'm like, yes, sir, I agree. You know what I mean? Because there's so many things that is right about the work, you know what I'm saying, that you're doing, and so many other brothers, you know what I mean? So it's like, I want to focus on that versus the wrong, because I had to share with somebody yesterday, I think, it's like, there's enough division going on in the world. So what we're not going to do is have any division going on here. We're going to keep it united. We stand, divided, we fall. You know, we're going to roll till the wheels fall off. So that's how we're going to do it in these Ashe streets.
Most definitely.
Yes, sir. So with that, bro, you just dropped the bomb. I think it was like Thursday, Friday. I don't know what day it was, a few days ago, the shift. So I got a chance to dig into that one. And I really wanted to kind of pick up, you know, where you left off in regards to not just the end times and the reset, but also with a lot of these landmarks or megaliths that are really, really crucial or critical locations for the planet Earth. One of the things that I saw that you went deep into was Mount Shasta, and how that's kind of like the chakra of, you know what I mean, of the planet. So I've heard a lot about a lot of extraterrestrial activity that's going on around Mount Shasta as well. I've heard there's been a lot of that. And then also, of course, the people who have the experiences where maybe they teleport, they astral project, or they have visitations from, you know, spiritual beings, etc. So can you kind of dig into some of the significance of Mount Shasta and how these historical and, you know, landmarks play a major role in what we're seeing during this great shift in this reset?
Well, the Seamount Axle is also in convergence with Mount Shasta. Now, Mount Shasta is the embodiment of the root chakra of planet Earth. So that means that as far as like the Kundalini awakening, it is acclimated and corresponding to the genetic format of those who's tapped into the carbonatic energies that's hitting the planet. So as we was talking about in the last interview, we were talking about those neutrinos. So those neutrinos is able to alchemize themselves through the solar flares. So when those solar flares hit, it gives a piezoelectrical frequency to that root chakra. So also the Seamount Axle, that is where the underground volcano is at. And we all know that the volcanoes are basically the pimples of planet Earth. And they found a whole bunch of eggs there that comes from a different species. Because one thing you got to understand about, you know, there's different layer systems when it comes to Hollow Earth, because it takes you to a different dimensional reality. But it's not only subjected to, you know, mind science technology. It's also acclimated to different ecosystems that's inside the planet Earth that has different bodies of water. Because one thing you got to understand about how everything that was constructed in the inception of time, everything in the beginning points of creation started with the photon hydrogen atom. Because the photon hydrogen atom creates electrons, electrons create elements, and elements create molecules, and molecules create organs, and organs create organ systems. And those organ systems have a different ecosystem that is acclimated to that ecological system, whatever, you know, as far as like geographical areas inside Earth, or they got different bodies of water. So the same thing actually translates in real time when you're talking about these energy points that sits at the root chakra where Mount Shasta is at, right? So that means that, like I said, it's, you know, it all corresponds with, you know, Hollow Earth. It all corresponds with the Kundalini circle, because we are in the 9 year, and the 9 year is the embodiment of a snake year. So that means that the Kundalini awakening is going to start where Mount Shasta is and where the Seamount Axle, right on the demarcation line of Oregon and California, right? So when those is coming in, that is activating planet Earth. So like I said, it corresponds with the human body. So that means that we're supposed to not overspill our cup of Hermes. Keep that cup full, right? Because the sexual fluid in itself is the cosmic fuel to activate the Merkaba to where you're able to escape the Metatronic overlay.
Yeah, that. Okay, you wrote a whole damn book with that response, but now
wait, and I forgot another thing. You also had the black sun in that geographical area in that time of 2017 when they said they had the solar eclipse, because that was a judgment eclipse. And that judgment eclipse is what created the ancient Alph symbol, what is also associated with the anarchy symbol and the sigil of the Antichrist. So that means that the reset corresponds with the judgment that starts at the apex of solar cycle 25 when you put that sigil system over, over the geographical areas of, of the United States government.
Yes, sir. Okay. Now I got a lot of different questions, but I'm gonna definitely pick my spots because I want to maximize this time. So with that, can you kind of get into the significance? You got into it, but can you go just a little bit further into the significance of this number 9? Now, 9 is a very divine number. We can talk about the 9 ether. We can talk about the Ened from ancient Kemet. You know what I mean? Like we can talk about, we're going to go into the Orisha pantheon with the Orishas. It's the transformation, with Oya is symbolic of the number 9. So when we're talking about what's happening now, especially this year being 2025, which is numerically a 9 year, how does that all tie into everything else, from a numerical and, as you would put it, what is it, gematria perspective?
Yes.
How does that all tie together?
So when you're talking about the number 9, 9 is a representation of completion. It's the completion of a cycle. Because when you look at the precessional circle of the equinox, it's said that the Draconian star constellation was working in harmony with the patrilineal system of the lunar cycle. Right? So now you're having a shift in the frequency. So when you have a shift in frequency, that means that the shifting process happens by way of the alignments of the constellation. So it transmutes from the Draconian star constellation to the star Polaris that is in alignment with the Aquarian age. That brings you right back into the galactic center. So that is basically the embodiment of the completion of the cycle, the seculum of a cycle that was facilitated by Shaitan when he had rule over the planet for 6,000 years. So since that dominion is up, now we must go through a reset, and that reset happens by way of the celestial alignments that corresponds with the numerical components of everything that takes place on the planet when you're talking about the binary code system of the matrix, because numbers are also associated with interstellar vortex portals because numbers contain a frequency. So the number 9 denotes the fact it's a form of rebirth. Like I said, it's a form of resurrection. So in the 9 year of 2025, that is associated with the serpent, which is the Kundalini serpent fire that strikes the pineal gland. So when that strikes the pineal gland, like I said, it resurrects the carbonated man and the woman on the planet when you're talking about the original people who have prokaryotic cells. And those prokaryotic cells work in harmony with mitochondrial DNA that's tether connected to the prokaryotes, which is the first organism in the universe.
Yeah, boy. I love it. And before I go to the next phase, there's one last thing I would like to hit. If you can kind of break down in the symbolism between 9, it's also the 9 ether with our hair. Those who have the kinky, curly, nappy hair that coils up towards the sun, versus those who have the 6 ether hair, which goes down to the earth. But I saw on a clip that I don't know if it was on your page or you was on somebody else's show where you was talking about a lot of people attribute only the 9 ether hair for people who have like froze or who have locks and things of that nature. But you also broke down how you can even look at the waves, people who have waves, how that even correlates to 9 ether as well. Can you kind of like touch on that before we move forward?
As cymatic frequencies, when you look at my waves, I got waves in my hair. So the cymatic vibrations have a certain octave vibration that corresponds with the 2 elements, which is silicone and carbon. So that means that it's highly magnetic. So it has a positive electrical frequency that contains a kinetic energy. So the same thing actually corresponds with dreadlocks or, locks or whatever. It's one of those things where, when you look at the inception of time, the hair follicle was also connected to the energy of trees because we had trees so big that it was going outside of the firmament, right? So that means that our power, which is our hair, was tether connected to these trees because that's where we was able to activate the epikinetic body, because the epikinetic body helps you pull out information from the epigenetics when you pull out information for the subconscious mind and you upload it into the neurological cortex.
Oh man, I love it. And you know what's funny? I was I think I was either our show or another show I was watching, but even like when you look at trees, right, like palm trees. So this T-shirt has the picture of a palm tree, right? And shout out
Mm,
to John Jacques Dessalines and Toussaint Louverture, the two generals from the Haitian Revolution,
right.
right? But if
Absolutely.
you look at this palm tree, it kind of reminds me of the phase I'm at in my locks. Like, you know what I'm saying? The
Mhm.
beginning phase, it looked like a little tree. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's dope how art imitates reality from nature's aspect, also to, you know what I mean, from the humanoid, connection aspect. So that's dope. That's
Mhm.
real dope. So now when it comes to all the different areas where there's a lot of different activity that's going on. I know you had the diagram of like how the A goes across the United States, right? And how
Mhm.
there's a lot of different types of like what's the word I'm looking for? There's a lot of different activity and motion that's going on in a lot of these different areas because of where they're situated on the fault lines and things of that nature. Where does Arizona play a role in some of these things? Like when you talk about the Grand Canyon, because I saw a post online, I think I just saw it today, but I don't remember who it was, but it was like some big crafts out in Arizona somewhere, I guess that service. Did you see that online anywhere?
I haven't seen it, but I know that's where the Cascadian Seduction Zone is at. So there's
Okay.
an interstellar vortex portal in that area. So that's why a lot of people say, "Oh, you can get to Africa through the Grand Canyon," but they
Mm,
don't ever give an explanation why. The reason that
mm,
is because it's in alignment with the Milky Way star constellation, which is
mm,
basically the epitome of the galactic center. So that's why in the inception of time, when you had the moon broke off, that's where it created a, a form of fermentation to the point where it was extracted from plutonium bombs. So where you have when you understand the inception of time, it talks about how Nibiru, when you're talking about the mothership, they have their own ecoid system. It had its own solar system, basically. It's autonomous.
mm,
So
yeah.
they shot one of the suns where the Grand Canyon is at. So that's where
Mm,
the inception point of where the black sun started to revitalize and mend the planet back together. Because
mm,
moon and planet Earth worked in synergy at one point in time. So the moon that we have in our solar system right now is basically the external hard drive of the planet Earth, and it's,
mm,
it's a quantum satellite, and it's a artificial celestial megastructure that is being weaponized to control the energy and the frequency and the vibration of humans on the planet. So the moon, it talks about it in Japanese folklore, how they told the moon into our solar system, the dragon, because the
mm,
dragon is also associated with the draconian, and draconian is also associated with the cherubim when you're talking about archonic forces.
mm.
So, I mean, there's many different layers to look at it.
Right. And that's another thing. I think we might have tapped into it or touched on it, but we didn't really go that deep into it. I don't think is like these archonic forces. So I remember having a conversation with another brother. I can't remember which episode because they all running together now, but I remember talking about the differences between creator gods and ruler gods. So when
Mm-hmm.
you speak about the archonic forces, right, can you kind of break down for us? Because some people, especially the people who's only been exposed to this channel, like in regards to you and your work, that haven't, been a subscriber of your channel, there's a lot that you have on there, and there's a lot that we covered the last time. But can you kind of break down the differences of these archons and the difference between a creator god and a ruler god in regards to who and what they are to what's happening now?
Okay. Well, from a biblical standpoint, when you're talking about archonic forces, it talks about how when the devil he took Jesus on Mount Sinai, he said, "I will give you all of this. I will give you the world." So when you're talking about the creation of the world in the inception of time in the book of Genesis, it's not talking about the creation of the universe. It's the creation of a simulation, and that simulation is being controlled by archonic forces who mimic the energy of human behavior to control them. So that means that they don't have the ability to create. So they mimic humans who have emotional intelligence. Because one thing, the reason they don't have the ability to create because they don't have that emotional energy to alchemize the emotional energy to where it's able to materialize and create something in the future. So that's why I said they need us. So that's why everything within the system is an energy extraction. That's why you got to go to work. You're basically stuck in a 1260 artificial time analysis mechanism. You're stuck in a 1260 time loop that's based on a recursive time loop trauma system. So that's why I was saying, like, as far as like artificial intelligence, it's actually corresponding with the archonic forces who is controlling humanity, but now it's happening by way of the technology. Because one thing about archons, there's a different nomenclature title when you're talking about Yaldabaoth. Yaldabaoth, his other name is Electro. So the
Mm,
electricity of oscillating signals that's working in tandem with the technological radiation is able to travel and basically mimic human behavior. So even when you're talking about parasites, like I said, parasites are basically tracking systems for the archons to control humans. Because like I said, they need us to control, or they need us to create this simulation. They don't have the ability to create by themselves. So that means that, like I said, the simulation is basically the epitome of the fact that we're stuck in a firmament. That's why when you're talking about in the book of Genesis, chapter 3, verse 5, it says that Satan separated the intergalactic waters from the third dimension. So that's why they talk about in the book of Genesis to create the firmament. The firmament is a controlled quarantine simulation. And that's what it uses. They can't create anything outside of that paradigm. So, like I said, that's when you get to the apex of the mental plane. So this is why you have a manipulation of technological devices, because the firmament is tether connected to the electrical grid, and it's connected to all these ley lines to block out the energy. Now they want to put another damn golden dome over the planet, right? Or just over the geographical area of America. And the reason that is because they know that the Schumann resonance spike is starting to speed up in vibration. So it's going from 7.83 megahertz frequency to 13.13 megahertz frequency, which is the Queen Mother seed. So that means that the restoration of the matriarch is happening by way of the activation of nature. So you got all these coronal mass ejection. These are the ancestors that's coming back and activating these chakra points where you're talking about Mount Shasta. Because if that volcano erupts, that's going to be 10,000 earthquakes that's going to trigger. That's going to activate the seven thunders. And the seven thunders are the seven bows, and the seven bows are the seven forms of destruction when you're talking about the Great Tribulation period.
Yeah, boy. Yeah. And okay. So 7 is another number that has a lot of symbolism and a lot of great attributes to it. So if you talk about like the seventh heaven, the seven chakras, the seven major musical notes on the musical scale, the seven major colors on the color spectrum, you know what I mean? Like the 7 days of the week, all those things. But then also you have the 7 layers of the inner earth, or to get to the inner earth. Does any of that kind of correlate and play a role as to when we like travel within, and like say if you want to go into a deep meditation and you kind of got to start with your root chakra and work your way all the way up through the crown chakra, does any of that play a role in how we're able to connect with the Schumann resonance, and we're able to connect with the information that's being streamed and beamed down from the neutrinos, or the information that's coming from, you know, the sun and the black sun, all that? Does all that kind of correlate together in regards to us being able to elevate our frequencies and to be able to astral travel and astral project, as well as elevating the resonance of our, you know, internal, or I should say auric or etheric body energies or frequencies?
Yes, because when you're able to tap into the extrasensory perception, which is where you get your intrinsic abilities such as clairvoyance and kinetic energy, or being able to read minds, you know, levitation, all this is activated by the gamma radiation, and that gamma radiation activates right knowledge. So that means that it has the ability to create those positive electrical crystals in the brain to where you become a god. So even in ancient Hinduism, they say that Shiva is the outer manifestation of, Krishna is the outer manifestation of Shiva, because Krishna is a representation of Christ, and Shiva, when you break down the etymological roots of the word, it means 7. So that means that 7 is also the embodiment of God. And also talks about, you know, a resurrection process too, by way of, you know, mind science technology. So even when you look at the inception of time, it's also talking about creation. So this is why in the Moore Science Temple, we hold up the 7, right? It's based on, you know, plant, animal, protoplasm, man, mankind, cherubim, and seraphim. So those are 7, you know, cycles of creation that created everything by way of the activation of carbon, because carbon is the building block of all civilization when it's all amalgamated with the ether to materialize, you know, physical reality, the circle of life. So that's why I was saying, like the Alpha and Omega, when you look at the ancient Hebrew Tav symbol, it represents creation and destruction. That's why I said 9 is the embodiment of the ending of a cycle, because something has to resurrect from it. And that's the resurrection of the indigenous people. So even when you look at the Denver airport, you know, monoliths inside they got these things. It's showing you the it's showing you the destruction of those that was cursed with leprosy. So that's why they show you the leprosy, the leopard being down. But they have the resurrection of the phoenix that's acclimated to the indigenous people. So that means that time period, as you have the resurrection of nature, you having a resurrection of a certain people that's connected to these land masses. That's what's taking place right now. So they're going to tell you every time about the symbolism.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm glad you mentioned the Denver airport, because that was something I wanted to bring up on the last one with you. It kind of slipped my mind in regards to all the other stuff we was talking about. But there is a whole lot going on that's attributed to that Denver airport. And I know there's a lot of conspiracy theories about it having a entry level or entry point to the inner earth, the underground tunnel systems, the underground bunkers, and all those things. Can you kind of share and tap into like what that particular airport is hiding, or what it's a cover for, or what it's there for? And then also, if you could share any insight or any knowledge that you may have, based upon your research as to what's going on from like the dark side or the shadow government aspects of that airport.
Denver, the reason that's a very an important place to the elite and the plutocracy, the reason that is because that's going to be the new capital when you're having a shifting of land masses. They even showed you in the movie, in the TV show Paradise. That's where they started to, transmute all the minerals and all these preservatives to, having these cave systems that was connected to the Denver airport. So like I said, that's where they're talking about the Emerald City in the Bible, right? So even though it's kind of like it's on a perceptual level, it's talking about the macrocosm and the microcosm. So the macrocosm of, the Emerald City is basically talking about there's going to be some type of extraterrestrial spaceship or mothership in that area. That's what they said that the Crystal City is going to rise up, because I believe there's an Emerald City in Colorado. But also it's also corresponding, talking about the activation of the pineal gland when it's able to dematerialize from calcification. So when you're talking about, the pineal gland, that is Emerald City. That is basically the connection of the sphenoid bone when you're talking about the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah, boy.
So it's able to crystallize. So it's in connection with the pituitary gland and the pineal gland. So that's also, in the embodiment of the Emerald City as well. So like I said, a lot of these stories in the Bible is actually corresponding to the context of the human body, but there is an actual Emerald City that they talk about in the Bible, which is the actual city that's in Colorado that's connected to the Denver airport. But we're also the Emerald City as well when you go through a crystallization process.
Yes, sir. Now, when you're talking about all of that with the whole process of the crystallization process, and then the pineal gland and, the pituitary gland, all that, where does the Barthany gland?
But yeah, the Bathari gland.
Bathari gland. Where does the Bathari gland play a role in this? Because I know all that's connected, and some people may have never heard of the Bathari gland. I heard of it, but being a student of doctors, I learned about it in research and studied it. But can you kind of share with us how that all ties in with our powers and the access to the abilities that we have, or that we lost due to us not having access to that Bathari gland?
Well, when you look at the cuneiform language and ancient Proto-Semitic language, it tells you that the Bathari gland is also esoterically connected to the hippocampus layer of the brain. So the Bathari gland, when you break down the etymology of the word and you get to the matrix of it, it means a different space and time. So that's connected to your higher abilities when you have the activation of the hippocampus layer of the brain, because they both work in tandem. So the hippocampus layer of the brain, in the inception of birth, when you go to these westernized, pharmaceutical organizations and you go to their facilities when you're born, they inject PCP inside the hippocampus layer of the brain that creates the holonomic brain theory. It's basically putting encryption over your neurological faculties to where, they're basically stopping it before you're able to tap into it. So they do all those stuff in the inception of birth. So they, that's why, as far as like the pharmaceutical industries or whatever, it actually goes against who we are on a neurological level and on a, genetical level, because it only corresponds with their synthetic forms of, how they carry themselves in their dietary systems or whatever.
Mm-hmm. And then even like with the utilization or the usage of both, hemispheres of the brain. So like me, for example, I'm someone who I'm ambidextrous because there's very few things I do. I guess technically I'd be considered left-handed because I write with my left hand, I eat with my left hand, I fight with my left hand, I shoot with my left hand, but everything else I do right-handed. I play basketball, football, baseball, bowling, like, you know what I'm saying? Everything else pretty much I do with my right hand. But I do know that there's some sort of correlation between people who are able to train their minds or who are just naturally ambidextrous by using the left and the right hand, because then you're activating both the left and the right hemisphere of the brain. So does that kind of play a role into like this whole thing when we're talking about the crystallization and the ability to time travel, astral project, or, just tap into that inner self? Does that all correlate to what we're talking about with the crystallization and the access to the Bartholin gland, as well as the pituitary and the pineal gland?
Yeah, because the activation of the crown chakra happens when you have the activation of the neuroendocrine transducer. So it transduces from a carbonated state into a crystalline state. So that's what we also call the philosopher's stone. The philosopher's stone is the pineal gland. When it's amalgamated with those neutrinos that we were talking about, because when you look at, when you're talking about Noah's Ark, because like I said, everything in the Bible corresponds with, the original man's, structure. So when you're talking about Noah, when you break down the etymology, it means mind. When you're talking about archangels, but those archangels are angles of light, and those angles of light hits the mind, which is neutrinos. That activates, the philosopher's stone in the form of crystallization. So that's what we talk. You're really just talking about, spiritual metamorphosis, where a human becomes God in the Aquarian age, basically. That's what you're talking about.
I love it. Shout out to Conscious Queen 84. She said it's the only time I've been able to relate to somebody scientifically breaking down the literal biological truth of existence. Yeah, that's what we're doing too. And we're going to continue to do that. So with us doing that, I know there's a lot of things going on with nature and with the planet, especially with, I think it was in Oregon, we were talking about the that underwater volcano. But also, can you kind of tap into these, what was it, 1,000 eggs that they found that they discovered? What was all that about, them eggs?
They were saying that, it was actually 2 million. So, they found 2 million eggs, and they said it's coming from an unknown species. So just, just by my logical assertion on that, those could be a Leviathan eggs, because volcanic eruptions, they can contain a certain loosh and sustenance to where draconian reptilians or archonic forces is able to feed on that loosh, is able to feed on that sustenance. So that's why when you look at, a lot of trees around volcanoes, that happens, the reason that is because they become a lot more greener. When just everything in nature tells you about the cosmic clock, it tells you what time it is. So anytime you see any type of intrinsic growth that is, connected to a form of nature. So a lot of the trees around volcanoes or whatever, they're a lot more greener. They're a lot more intrinsic when they're about to activate. That's because it contains a energy of carbon dioxide, and that carbon dioxide activates that, that energy underneath the planet that's connected to those volcanoes. So it's kind of like the same process. It's like, the reset in itself is just, tapped into the fact that the earth is going through a rebirth. When a woman's pregnant, she's glowing and things of that nature. So the planet is actually doing the same thing. That's why the trees is, the sun is shining brighter, the green, grass is greener, trees is greener, everything is starting to activate.
I love that analogy because we got a lot of females in the house tonight, and I know every female and a lot of brothers who either have children or married or, has been in a relationship with a woman during that time frame. But yeah, everything increases. Like their hair grows faster. I believe the nails grow faster. The skin shines brighter. You know what I mean? Everything is heightened. You know what I mean? On a whole, like not even just an esoteric scale, like on a whole physical and spiritual scale, everything is heightened. And you have some women who, I know this for a fact, like I think even like my mom, but I know there's other people and other women who are hairdressers where they can tell if a woman is pregnant just by them touching their hair. Like they can feel the difference in their hair follicles. Yeah, I've heard of that. I bet you somebody that I know, I'm not the only one that's heard of that before. Tribe, if y'all have either experienced it or someone who has experienced that. But yeah, women can tell if other women are pregnant when they're doing their hair or doing something with their hair. I can't tell you what the whole, like how they're able to do that, but I know that's a real thing that I've heard,
I wonder if that's the reason why they probably have the activation of that X gene, because the X gene is what turns you into an X-man, X-woman. Like I said, when you understand the inception of time, when you're talking about the genetic mutation process of the man and the woman, because when you look at the X chromosome, it's actually, a genetic mutation of the man. So what I'm basically saying is that the man is a genetic mutation of the woman. So that's why the Y looks like a broken X.
Yeah.
So the activation of the X gene. Hello?
Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, the activation of the X gene is actually, talking about, your intrinsic abilities. The so-called black woman or the indigenous woman, she's the original being on the planet.
I sure. Somebody
had called me. This took me off the screen.
Oh, okay. I see you loud and clear on my end, man. We're good. But yeah, that's definitely a real thing. So I've seen it. I've heard of it, and I've heard people who share with me that, that happens in regards to like the women and being pregnant and things of that nature. But when it comes to those eggs, where do they find those 2 million eggs at?
They found them at the Seamount Axle in Oregon. So it's actually in the same area where you have Mount Shasta. It's just water.
Wow. I'm curious as to like what that could be. Like they just appeared out of nowhere. Like how long has it been since they've been discovered?
It's been about they've been talking about it for the past 2 weeks.
Yep. So
it's
all brand new.
Yeah. So those, like I said, in my opinion, those are Leviathan eggs.
And what is that?
Leviathan is a serpent, or it's.
I know about Leviathan, but what are the eggs? So you think that the serpent actually had eggs and like laid them?
What I'm thinking is because they don't know where it came from, and they're giant eggs. That's where they found them. You know what I'm saying? They found them at the Seamount Axle, right at the apex of the root chakra of planet Earth.
This is crazy.
And that's also the same area. If that volcano erupts, you're going to have over 10,000 earthquakes that can activate every fault line in America. So that's why I said it corresponds with, those 3 solar eclipses, the solar eclipse from 2017, 23, and 24. So the Ring of Fire solar eclipse was on my birthday on October 14th of 2003. So you also got the Ring of Fire geographical area right where the Seamount Axle and Mount Shasta was at, and the same place where the Black Sun was at. Not a coincidence. Not a coincidence. Wow. So because, like I said, just even when you're looking at, from a spiritual metamorphosis standpoint, when you're talking about the activation of the chakra points, we all know, like I said, your sexual energy is your cosmic fuel. You need that to resurrect yourself. That's how you activate the Kundalini. It starts at the root chakra first. That's why you have a lot of hedonistic activity in Hollywood, because they got to invert the energy. Because if they invert the energy, that means that those people in that geographical location can tap into their power, because they're using the sex in a form of hedonism. They're using it for Canaanite practices and worship. They're not using it for spiritual transmission.
Yeah, they're using it to do dark magic with it. That's what they're doing. And that plays a
tree.
Huh?
That's why they do the Hollywood tree. When you're talking about the Hollywood symbol, the wood up there, the Hollywood symbol, they use it for transgressive art. Because Hollywood ability, when it amalgamates with semen, you can actually, alchemize and use it for, dark incantations.
Yeah.
Sacrifice.
Yeah, because even like the name Holly, like Hollywood, like that's like a tree, like fairies and freaking what are they called? The little fairies that be having the little thing with the little wand and all that. Like
fairy.
That stuff is real. I think people don't realize how real it is, but it's real. Like they be like,
they even showed you in the movie Robin Hood with Robin Williams. Remember, I think it was Robin Hood Hook, when he became Peter Pan.
See, I haven't seen that in a long time. I haven't seen it. I have to go back and watch that. But I know, I do know it's a real thing, though. I know that part.
Yeah, it's talking about Hollow Earth. You got mermaids and everything in Hollow Earth. So everything that they telling us that's fantasy, Those are
Right.
actually fifth dimensional black civilizations because
Mm.
Peter Pan was actually black. He was a blackamoor that lived inside Hollow Earth, but he
And
was actually green.
and then you have like the it's a lot like the dwarfs, like that's real.
Yep.
You know, it's just so many things that we see that we really like they putting right in our face, and a lot of people don't realize or don't know that it's real. Like for example, I was just having a conversation the other day about different types of extraterrestrial species, right? And I'm like, there's so many different types of species and variations that it's like we could literally do a podcast every day for the rest of the month and not cover probably every species that's out there because there's so many different ones. So even like the ones who, you know, that are like the praying mantis, for example, right? You have those beings who they're actually humanoid beings that, you know, that are like praying mantis. You have, you know what I mean? Like, there's so many that we can go into the different types of species, but they put the truth in our face. But because they, you know, I think they dumb down so many people and they try to make it out to be like it's just fairy tale or fiction. They that we don't. The truth is so hard to believe it's unbelievable. You know what I mean? Because we talk about the Sasquatches. We got into that last time. We talked about how they're real. You know, especially how they travel. You know, through wooded areas and Amazon areas with a lot of vegetation and all that, how they can create kind of like portals and how they can create those cloaks to kind of cloak themselves so people can't see them and all that. And I remember after we did that one, somebody, I don't know if it was on the live or in the comments where they were saying Harry and the Hendersons and how, you know what I mean? Like that's a good correlation as to what, you know, these real Sasquatches are.
Mm-hmm. They're going to start to reveal themselves eventually.
Yeah.
Because because this is why I'm going to say that, because the more you have a manipulation in the energy grid, that's going to dematerialize the ley lines, because the ley lines is how they hide, because these ley lines have black holes in them. So it's kind of like the same thing. Like when I'm in my house, you got black holes inside